Elitexc went by the wayside. What were you thinking at the time?
At the time, it was tough for me. I had a fight lined up for November 8th, the Elitexc card that got canceled, and I found out a couple weeks before that it was getting canceled, and I was looking forward to that payday, toward the end of the year and stuff. And I was fortunate enough for Strikeforce to pick me up a couple weeks later in late November, I think November 21st. So I was fortunate to fight there. But yeah, it was actually kind of funny. I watched when Kimbo Slice lost, and I was with my dad, and he kind of looked at me and said, well, hopefully your fight still happens in November. And I'm
really?
Like, I'm sure it'll go through. And I think he obviously nailed it. That was kind of the nail in the coffin for Elitexc.
Yeah.
They put all their eggs in one basket, and it didn't work out for them.
Did you track the stuff the next couple of days with Seth Petruzelli?
Yeah, I paid attention to that a little bit.
Because to me, as a fighter who was under contract with that company, that's when I would have been like, really? Did you just say that the fight was potentially altered behind the scenes?
Yeah, what a knucklehead. And who's going to want to pick him up, put any money in him, on there? I don't think Strikeforce would.
No? You don't think it's going to happen?
I don't think so. I wouldn't hire the guy to fight for me, saying that kind of stuff behind their back.
It was bad.
Yeah.
I mean, that's serious business. When you start talking about fight fixing, we went nuts on it because it's awful for the entire sport of mixed martial arts. It makes
absolutely.
every promotion.
Yeah, that's been the big difference between boxing and MMA is how legit MMA is, and that's a step toward boxing right there.
So what were you thinking as a fighter with Elitexc as the Kimbo stuff was developing before the fight? The way the promotion was being run and the fact that he was being put in main events, and because I know Dave will chime in here in a second. Dave hated it the entire time and trashed it. What do you think as a fighter, though?
Well, you can't blame Kimbo for it. I mean, he was being thrown a ton of money at him, and what is he going to do? Say no, I'm not going to take $500,000 to fight.
I'm not blaming him.
No. But Elitexc, they just they weren't smart in putting all their eggs in one basket. Like I've said this a few times that you got to be like the WC. Their poster boy was Uriah Faber. But they also promoted other good fighters, Miguel Torres and that. And, Uriah Faber, the unbeatable guy, went down in his last fight against Mike Brown. Now Miguel Torres is the face. You got it. They had guys like Jake Shields, Robbie Lawler. They got to pump those guys up more than just Kimbo. That was their mistake.
I think that part of it is that, we see it in other sports all the time where owners or key people in an organization think they know a lot about the sport. They really don't. They should let the people who actually do know something about the sport handle things. And I think that may have been the case with the whole failed Kimbo experiment. I really think George Shaw thought this guy's good. He's not good. And they made a huge mistake.
You really think he thought he was good?
Yep.
I think so, yeah.
Really? You think Jared thought he was a good fighter?
Yeah, and the guy...
I don't think he had any clue.
I think the guy definitely has potential. He's doing the right things, working with Boss Rutan, and he's a big, strong, athletic guy, but... You got to build a guy up, give him some time. So
did it irk you in any way? Well, you tell me. Did you think that when you were the main event that it was promoted the right way? Because obviously the audience dropped off. Were you just set up to kind of, not that you failed, but I'm saying as a main event, you'd like to maybe bring in the same type of numbers and get the same kind of media attention. Were you set up to fail? I try to look at the more positive side of it, and I was the undercard against Robbie Lawler when Kimbo was the main event. Mm-hmm. And that because people want to watch Kimbo. Bottom line, people are wanting to tune in. So I have no problem with them promoting him and putting him on a card. If people want to watch, put him on. I just think they over promoted him. Now because Kimbo was on the card, more people tuned in to watch me and Lawler fight. And we had a great fight. Ended up going to a no contest. But because Kimbo was on the card, I gained new fans. So I was okay with that. But with him being the main event and the only big draw, I think that's why the numbers dropped off. I think they should have promoted me and Lawler a little bit more. All right. That's Scott Smith. He's coming up on the Strikeforce card this Saturday. It's Stephen Davey, ESPN Radio 1100 in San Jose and in Vegas. So as we look ahead to the fight against Benji Radek, nice matchup. I mean, and from a style standpoint, I don't think he's going to look to get you down and lay on top of you. Yeah. You know what? I think both of us have underrated ground games. We both have good wrestling and jiu-jitsu, but we're just two guys that like to stand and bang, and our records show that. He's got 16 knockouts. I got 14 knockouts, and it kind of tells you how the fight's going to go right there. It's two guys that just love to put on a show, so this is going to be the fight of the night. Should be pretty nasty. You fought a lot of the elite, and we're talking to Scott Smith, the middleweight with Strikeforce. You fought a lot of the elite middleweights across the board, including Lawler. Where do you think he is on the world level? Oh, he's definitely top 5. Some people got him as the number 2
middleweight in the world. I definitely think he's right up there.
You know, it almost seems in middleweight, you've got some guys who are really well-rounded, but it almost seems like there's developing this style thing. I don't know why it is, but you have guys who are not exclusively, but primarily stand-up guys, and then you've got this whole influx of Brazilian fighters who are jiu-jitsu fighters. Is that kind of part of the well, I'll ask you, does the division have an image issue because of that, or what do you think it is right now? Or is it getting better?
I think MMA in general, it's a wave. It goes from jiu-jitsu guys to strikers to wrestlers, and it's going back and forth, and I kind of see it going back into wrestlers starting to dominate. You're starting to see a lot more NCAA champions coming in there and Olympic wrestlers coming in and, learning to be good enough on their feet to survive. And where before it was these guys that were great stand-up fighters learning just enough wrestling to keep the fight standing up. So it goes in waves. I
don't know. I kind of look at some of the jiu-jitsu guys that are being brought in, and their hands are so bad. I don't know if they're going to survive or not. I don't know.
Yeah, see, and that's why I think the wrestling is dominating more than the jiu-jitsu, because wrestlers will get it to the ground. A jiu-jitsu guy doesn't have the ability to get it to the ground like a wrestler does.
So how good is Silva?
Anderson Silva is. I actually think he's the number 2 pound for pound fighter in the world.
And who's number 1?
I think Georges St. Pierre is.
Really?
And I know he got caught by Matt Serra, but I definitely think he's the best fighter in the world.
All right. Dave, we've had this argument before. I know you favor the little guys.
Yes.
Yeah. Dave's not a big fan of the heavyweight, so immediately he eliminates a guy like Fedor, which I'm sorry, I don't get.
So do I.
Well, I'm saying you do. I don't. Yeah.
Well, after Arlovsky fought him, I think without Arlovsky getting clipped there, he was definitely winning that fight, and I think he was on his way to win the fight. But yeah, I mean, Fedor definitely is good, but
Well, you just threw it in there.
Okay, he's one of the top 5 fighters, but I wouldn't. Some people have him the best pound for pound fighter. I don't think so.
So what is the weakness? Well, you think is it competition?
I just don't think he's a workhorse like Anderson Silva and Georges St. Pierre. I just don't, and the competition too. I think.
So you look at him. Say you could say. I mean, I think he could easily cut down to 205. He's got a lot. He's got a lot.
And now 205s, I think he would be even more of a dominant force.
Oh, he would.
Yeah.
All right. Because by your argument, I think. Well, you're saying if he worked down to 205, then all of a sudden conditioning, you don't think anyone could beat him at 205. To me, one of the super fights would be, and I don't think it should be out of the question down the road. I would love to see Silva stay at one of the kind of his walking around weight and meet at a catch weight. Yeah,
I was just going to say Anderson Silva at 205 against Fedor at 205. Yeah. I'd give Anderson Silva the edge.
All right. Well, speaking of catch weights, what do you make of? Maybe you had one reaction early on. I think a lot of people, when they first saw Shamrock going against Diaz, they were like, because the weight difference looks so big on the surface. But I thought right off the bat, I've seen Nick in person, between fights, and he's gigantic. So he's not a small guy.
No, not at all. And when I first heard the fight, I thought, Shamrock's too big and strong for him. I think he's gonna outpower him. But after the press conference, I didn't really pay much attention to it. But Diaz was talking about how Shamrock's too small, and I'm kind of like, well, it's the exact opposite of what I was thinking. But could
that be the case? Really?
Yeah, Diaz is big. What is he? He's got to be at least 6 foot.
Well, I think he's probably 6'1", actually.
Yeah, so he might be a little taller than me, and I'm 6 foot. And so yeah, he does walk around big. It's a tough one to call. If Diaz shows up,
how do you think it plays out? Is it a stand-up war, or does Nick have an advantage by going to the ground?
I think it's tough because Nick's better on the ground on his back, and that's where Shamrock's good on the ground is when he's on top.
Right.
So it's a good style matchup. But I think they're going to bang it out. I think Shamrock's really going to chase him down, and Diaz should sit back and trying to counter-strike him.
Dave, I think this is one of those fights, and we're talking to Scott Smith, and we'll get to our update here and pay some bills here in a second. Scott, nice enough to join us at the Marriott here in San Jose as we get ready for the Strikeforce card, and we're talking MMA, and the card comes up on Saturday. This is one of those fights that if you like striking, it may go to the ground a little bit, but from a striking standpoint, both guys are actually pretty refined strikers, but they do it in different ways. Frank is a little more conventional. I've rarely seen anyone strike like Diaz. I think his style is unique, and it's kind of bizarre because it doesn't look like it's a power approach because his hands are so far out in front of his body, but he kind of pecks you to death, and eventually you wear down.
Wears you down, yeah.
Have you seen anyone else work like that?
His brother.
Not as well, though.